So how Metta works, you might all be familiar with this, with the Paul Gilbert research that he's done on the emotional regulation systems. I'm just going to touch on this really briefly. But he talks about the drive system and the threat system, and we're all really kind of familiar with that. We all spend most of our busy days in the Western world either driving, being motivated, being working towards something with lots of dopamine running around our systems and wanting, pursuing, achieving, progressing, which we need that. We need that to be able to survive in the world, don't we? To be able to afford to buy food, to get to Tesco's when we need to go and buy our shopping. We can't just be, we have to be driven. And then the threat system, which we're all familiar with as well, which, in theory keeps us safe a lot of the time. And that's sort of feelings like anger, anxiety, disgust. But the problem with the threat system is that it can be triggered by emotional situations. So at work, when we feel like someone's not respecting us or someone's done us wrong at work, that can trigger our threat system as well. So we spend most of our lives these days in the drive and threat system, and we don't spend very much time in the soothing system, which is where we feel contented, safe, protected. It's where oxytocin is released, the soothing hormone. And what Metta practice does, it targets the soothing system directly. So when we're cultivating Metta in our practice, we're directly in our soothing system, and that balances the whole thing out. So we can move through the three rather than being stuck in the drive system or the threat system if we have a lot of anxiety. And it's not important to feel so much during Metta practice, as feeling will kind of drift in and out. You might have noticed that in your practice today. The important part is to practice conscious cultivation of Metta as we're beginning to incline our minds, our intent towards kindness to ourselves, towards befriending ourselves. And this begins to lay down new neural pathways. So it starts to become a habit, really, of being kinder to ourselves, being kinder to our experience, and being kinder to others. So it's quite radical stuff, really. And number 10 is really interesting to me as well. I read this recently about some research at the Max Planck Institute in Germany, where they did a big control trial of, they got people to sit in a room and watch distressing images of people in real poverty or in war zones. And they had sort of electrodes fastened to their own heads, and they could measure their brain activity. And what they noticed was that when they were being shown the distressing images of people suffering, that it lit up the part of their brain that was to do with their own suffering as well. So they were feeling the suffering almost as if it was their own. Their empathy was so deep that it was lighting up these parts of their brain. And people were feeling obviously quite distressed in relation to these images. And then what they did, they put people through an 8-week course of Metta practice, so like the practice you did with me today. And after the 8 weeks, they showed people the same images and had the electrodes on their brains and stuff. And what it showed was that a different part of people's brains was lighting up, not the one that was to do with their own suffering, but the one that was to do with the soothing part of the brain, the mammalian caregiving system, we call it. So it was lighting up that part of the brain that enabled people to engage with other people's distress in a productive way. They wanted to help, they wanted to kind of give compassion and help that person. So that's really important for a really important piece of research. If you look at the original, outside of secular mindfulness, if you look at the original Dharma, the Buddha's Dharma, the suttas, when he wrote about mindfulness, in the suttas, the two things aren't kind of separated out. So mindfulness and compassion and befriending are one in the same. They say the two things need to go together. And they liken it to the two wings of a bird. You've got mindfulness and awareness, insight and clarity on one side, and the compassion and befriending on the other side. And obviously, you take one wing away, the bird can't. Okay, the bird can't fly. You take, compassion away, the bird can't hold itself up. You take mindfulness away, the bird can't hold itself up. And I think we've kind of missed that a little bit. I think mindfulness has become so huge in the West that the compassion element has kind of been left by the wayside a little bit. And that's what we at Mind are trying to sort of bring together, really. We're trying to find ways that we bring more metta, more compassion into our 8-week courses that we deliver to people in the community. Finally, I wanted to just talk about how this could work. I mean, it really inspires me, the meta part of the mindfulness debate at the minute, and I think it's the new wave of mindfulness, even though it's a really old wave. Obviously, it goes back to the Buddha. But I think there's a really good book called Intelligent Kindness by Balat and Campling. And it kind of uses principles of Metta about how mental health care in the UK could be reformed. And one of their quotes that they put in, it says that kinship and kindness, properly understood, can themselves shape the quality, effectiveness, and efficiency of healthcare. And they talk about imagining a world where we're not just judging people, workers, on their competencies, we're actually judging them on their qualities, the qualities of human kindness. And I think it's a really exciting thing, and we're starting to do that more in Salford as well. We're starting to go into bigger corporations and bigger organisations and say, what about introducing a culture of kindness within your organisation? Which is quite radical. We've done that in some big corporations in Salford Quays recently. Me thinking going in there, it's a bit tree-hugging, hippie stuff, but they've really embraced it. They've really started to change the culture of their organisation and seen productivity changes as a result of that as well. So imagine supporting mental health professionals to develop more self-compassion and to foster a culture of kinship and kindness, which in turn enables us to care for others with a greater capacity and prevents burnout. It goes back to the research we were talking about with the Max Planck Institute, that if you foster within a team of healthcare workers, if you foster kinship and kindness, it transforms the workplace. They're able to kind of support each other, because usually the first thing that goes out of the window when we're stressed is compassion for ourselves and compassion for others. So I think this is a really radical idea, but I think it's a really exciting idea, and it's something for all of us. We can all cultivate metta, we can all cultivate kindness. And also imagine if we could support individuals with mental health issues to become less self-critical and more self-compassionate. I think that's good for everybody. It's not just for people with mental health issues. We've all got mental health. We're all on a continuum of mental health. And I think it's good for us all to be able to protect our well-being. And what we're finding through our research with City University is that it's a really protective thing, compassion. If we can cultivate mindfulness and metta, it really kind of protects us for the future. It protects our own mental health, our own mental well-being. So I'd encourage you all to explore metta more. Christina Feldman's books on metta are fantastic. She's a brilliant teacher and she kind of slips under the radar, Christina. I think that's how she likes it. But, I just want to finish with a quote from the Dalai Lama. You can always rely on the Dalai Lama. But he says, "People were created to be loved. Things were created to be used. The reason why the world is in chaos is because things are being loved and people are being used." I couldn't have said it better myself. And that's just my contact details, and also Mia's. If you want to get in touch with us, if you want to collaborate with us, do some research with us, just get to know us a bit better, that's great. Welcome you getting in contact with us. But thank you very much. Thank you, everybody.